Good afternoon, everybody. Today is the meeting on February 13th of the Board of County Commissioners work session. Greg Postman is homesick with COVID yet again today, so I'm going to be acting chair, and we expect that Greg will be zooming into the meeting, although it doesn't appear he's joined us yet. So first up on our agenda is a discussion about the bears at the landfill and possible solutions to that.
Great.
So Brian, will hand it off to you and to Kathy, whoever is going to carry this discussion.
Thanks, Steve. We'll just do introductions first. Maybe start down here.
Yeah, Curtis Dash, Parks and Wildlife.
Kathy Hall, Solid Waste Manager.
And Brian Pettit, the Public Works Director. I want to thank Curtis for being here. He's our expert in the room, so appreciate him taking time out of his busy schedule to show up with the board to talk about bears at the landfill, which is not a new condition. This has probably been going on since 1965. I can tell you it's been going on for at least 33 years. So with that, Kathy does have a presentation she'd like to go through to describe kind of the approach that we've been taking, at least in my tenure at the county, with regard to managing the bears at the landfill. And we have been close partners with, at that time, the DOW and now Colorado Parks and Rec. So we appreciate that partnership in not only managing the bears, but also the other wildlife at the landfill. If people haven't been out there, it's a little bit of a sanctuary, whether it's bald eagles or elk or deer, or a plethora of corvid, crows and ravens. So COVID on my mind, Steve. So, but hopefully we can get the presentation fired up here directly. in order for that to happen.
Isn't it a murder of crows?
It is a murder of crows.
That's so spooky.
We're getting close here, I feel it.
I saw a crow today in a parking lot picking at a bag of M&M peanuts. And it had an orange M&M peanut, and it would roll, and the crow would try. And it was very entertaining, obviously, but it just made me laugh to see this crow trying to eat these M&M peanuts. And yeah.
Pretty entertaining birds to watch at the landfill as they congregate and chatter and carry on in their fashion.
Greg, we are in the meeting, we're having a little technical difficulty on getting the presentation up on the screen.
So Ravens, before I put a top on my chicken run,
Can't hear us.
came in and took all my adolescent chickens, they were about babies this big, and dropped them in the horse trough. But we didn't know they were in the horse trough, so we just knew our chicks were all gone. It was really terrible. And then you can imagine what water got to be like. I didn't like ravens for a long time after that.
Greg can't hear us, if there's a way to mess with that.
All right.
All right, good job.
What are you doing over here? I'm stealing a box of Kleenex. It's hogging them all over here.
I don't know if I can put it
I'm on my side of the room over here.
Well, I don't know. I mean, this might be hot on me. I'm good. Thank you. Ben.
Yep. Perfect. All right. Thanks, Rosa. We had a little technical difficulty there. All right. As Brian said, we are here to talk about bears at the landfill. So we recently, staff met with some Bear Coalition groups, the Roaring Fork Bear Coalition and then the Colorado Bear Coalition.
The Roaring Fork Bear Coalition. I didn't know there was
They're
a
right here.
All right.
And just bringing up interest of helping us kind of manage the bears at the landfill and some ideas on how to better manage the bears at the landfill. So presenting here today are the options to the two most realistic options we discussed. But just a little background, the landfill is located in prime bear habitat. We are not unique. Landfills in the western states all have bears. We're in bear country. There's interest in protecting the landfill bears, and again, we discussed the options. So two management scenarios. We currently do a hazing program of the bears, as well as electric fencing surrounding all of the landfill or a portion of the landfill. So the hazing program that we currently participate in, we scare them with vehicles, loud noises, blow the horn. They're typically big scaredy cats. My 11 years at the landfill, and probably prior to that, there's been no known aggressive bear-human interactions. They typically, I've walked out of the scale house, turned the corner, and there's one 10 feet away, and they're like, oh, they run away. So,
And you too?
yeah, it's startling. But yeah, so we both go our separate ways like a cartoon. And most of the time, the older bears, they know the routine. They see a truck coming, we blow their horn, they run off. Sometimes we get a younger bear that's a little more stubborn, still likes to hang around the working face, too close to customers. We will then resort to a rubber pellet in the behind. Oh, thank you. Sorry. So yeah, and that typically they learn pretty quick, and then they skedaddle while we're open during the day. 4 o'clock comes around, 4:30 when we close, they all come down out of the hills and start their midnight feeding. The other option discussed was electric fencing. So that's 7-foot tall fence lined with a tensile mesh game fence, 7 strands of electrified wire, 110-volt electric charger powered by solar with a battery backup, 20-foot wide steel gates at the access points, and we're estimating at about $85 a linear foot. Now, this does not include any earthwork that would have to happen, leveling ground, crossings over stormwater ditches, and it also doesn't include maintenance. We feel this would probably be a high maintenance activity, just given the conditions we're in, and know that bears are pretty resilient. I see it like a Jurassic Park. They'll test the wires until it goes down. Curtis, feel free to jump in.
Over the barbed wire.
Greg says he can barely hear us. Is there a way to?
You just need to speak louder and closer to the
Okay. Sorry, Greg.
We can't hear him
Can't
either.
hear him either.
It's not easy.
That's on the computer. Are we using the phone? Is it muted?
While we're waiting, Greg, can I ask Cassie something? I mean,
Yes,
Steve.
go ahead.
Are you going to address why it's a problem having bears at the landfill?
Yeah.
Is that a given?
It's-
Are we supposed to know that?
I can address that.
Yeah.
Yeah, bears at the landfill, they're becoming habituated to unnatural food sources, right? The reason why we have bear-resistant cans in town, why we have locking dumpsters, containers, stuff like that. So that's for the
It's for the bears.
It's for the bears, yes.
Thank you.
Are we all good to go? Okay. So I have to apologize. In the packet material, I included the wrong attachment. So this first one is the correct one. So 2 options of electric fence. The first one is a fence surrounding the working face. That is the areas where we're actively filling trash. Estimated at 4,800 linear feet at the $85 cost. And again, that doesn't include any earthwork, construction, stormwater ditch crossings, $409,000. It would need to be relocated in 5 years because our current active fill areas only have about 5 years of life left. Then it would need to be relocated to the new working face area that we're currently in the process of designing and getting funding for. The other option was to enclose with an electric fence the surrounding landfill property. And that is 11,951 linear feet at a cost of over $1 million. I think, and I'll let you jump in, Curtis, electric fences they work. However, the maintenance, the construction, the maintenance, and the upkeep of it would be a constant.
Yeah, and electric fences, be clear, it's the only thing that's going to work. There's no other fence you could put up that a bear is not going to test, not going to try to dig under, not going to try to climb over. The construction of the fence would have to be metal posts, no wood posts. We've all seen bears climbing wood posts on the highway fence and stuff like that. So, and then reiterating the maintenance for sure. All that vegetation, anytime there's overgrowth or a down branch or anything that touches those wires, it's going to ground them out. So it almost have to be a daily walkabout on the property, testing the wires and making sure everything is good, making sure they're not burrowing underneath, making sure everything is nice and tight all the way around.
Mm-hmm. So with that said, I mean, probably including if we did go this route, an electric fence, it would be probably an additional FTE at least, just to maintain that fence on a daily basis. The other issue, what I've heard, is the fear of driving bears into the neighboring Aspen Village, Wildcat Ranch, and then you got a bear problem there.
Yeah, so if we did go the route of fencing the landfill, we've got roughly 25, 30 bears that are there that utilize that landfill as a food source, as home, right? So those bears would have to be dealt with one way or another. Either they would have to be fenced out, and since they're habituated to human food from the landfill, closest thing is going to be Aspen Village, where we already have issues with bears there, and they will expand. They'll go out, cross the river onto Upper River Road there, they'll go to Wildcat and they're going to look for a food source somewhere else. They won't revert back to natural forage. So they're habituated trash, they're going to find trash somewhere. The other option would be to euthanize all the bears inside, which CPW is not in support of at all.
Kelly.
Can you talk about the options that you excluded? So we don't go down a, because I'm already like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And I'm like, well, they probably thought about all these things. So maybe just tell us what you took off the list.
One other option that came up that's coming to mind is bear dogs. A Karelian bear dog
Oh, yeah.
has been proven effective at running
They're-
bears off.
Cool dog.
Go to the landfill.
Yeah, I don't think that's a very good landfill pet, and the management of that. And I believe there's wildlife regulations. I'm not a hunter. You can't harass wildlife with dogs and such. So that was kind of kicked out of the option.
Yeah, for one, we've talked about those dogs a little bit within our agency, and the amount of time and effort goes into training those dogs, keeping those dogs continually trained up on it. It's going to be a daunting task for sure. And then with this broader spectrum electric fence, if you look at the two kind of the basins right there on the southwest end there, that's where a lot of elk hang out too. So when we do our counts, do our elk counts and deer counts and stuff like that, we have a lot of resident elk that like to hang out there too. So we would be displacing them. Not that they would have to go far, they would go back into Wildcat, right? But it's just something else that we're going to be kicking them out.
Francie?
I'm wondering why you need 7 strands of electricity, because at my chicken house, I just ran 1 strand around and the bear never messed again. It was like, that's enough, I'm done here.
Curtis brought up probably 2 would be sufficient.
Yeah, I brought something that up, the very same thing up when I saw this, and yeah, 7 seems a little overkill. That's just what the contractor recommended. Definitely 2. You're going to want 1 lower and 1 maybe mid height sort of deal. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Greg. Oh, there he is. He's tiny there.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. I'd love to know if, and I'm hoping you can, sorry, I came in a little bit late. I was having trouble getting on. Is that Curtis who's there?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for being there, Curtis, and Kathy, thank you for this. This is a worthwhile conversation, I think. Regarding the elk hanging out, I've been told the elk are kind of hanging out in the compost, which to me represents kind of an attractive nuisance and certainly not a natural environment for them. I'd love to hear more about where the elk are. Secondly, I'm wondering about the population of the bears. Is it growing, and what are we actually doing to the health of the bears? If they're eating trash, I assume they're probably eating all sorts of stuff that probably isn't good for them, and then they're probably leaving, pooping it out across their terrain, which can't really be good for our environment either, nor theirs. So I'm concerned about this, and I'd like to really understand what the best practices are, because on the face of it, it seems that we have a problem and we're looking for reasons not to do anything. That's my impression, having heard what I've heard so far. And I know it's expensive. I know we were going to be changing the landfill, but I do think we need to address this one way or another, because I'm not sure the problem's going to go away if we pretend it's not a problem. And I understand the solutions you've presented as the stopgap solutions, but I kind of want to know what's happening elsewhere, and what's the other argument for doing something.
Yeah, to address your first question, the elk, they do move into the, what did he say? The compost piles there. They do pick through it. I don't think they're getting into anything that's going to be really necessarily detrimental to them. But it definitely has an effect on them for sure. They're a species that if they were fenced out, they'd be fine. They're going to go find forage somewhere else. As far as the diet for the bears, yeah, trash is definitely not something that we want them into. The way it affects them is it it provides a higher caloric intake than what naturally they should be having, right? So they're fatter bears, they're in a sense healthier bears to the point where they can produce more offspring. So typically we used to see bears, would have 1, maybe 2 cubs, and that was it. But with supplementing this unnatural food source, it's actually increasing, where we're seeing cubs, litters of 3 and 4 now.
Really?
So not just at the landfill, this is across the county, the reason why we've been pushing bear resistant containers for so long is because of the, unhealthy nature of the food that they're acquiring.
Kelly?
I was wondering, is there a strategy to move the bears at a certain age where maybe they don't become accustomed, or and then another question was, is there a strategy to do like targeted plantings where they don't want to come to the landfill and maybe they want to go
Eat
eat
berries
somewhere else?
next door.
Yeah.
So targeting, planting, stuff like that, once they've acquired this food source, they're not going to. That's like putting broccoli out in a bowl of candy and telling the kid to go eat the broccoli. It ain't gonna happen. So they're definitely
Maybe
gonna
they eat
be.
enough candy.
I don't know, my grandson would eat the broccoli. He's one of those.
So yeah, it's definitely an idea, and it's been thought of even around city limits here, doing that, trying to
Right.
keep them out, but it's not something that's feasible.
Proven strategy, and moving them at a younger
Moving them,
age
so
or
when
something.
we do have conflicts in town, say we have a nuisance bear that hasn't met that threshold of euthanization, we will relocate that animal. We've taken them up to Burns, across the interstate, 100 miles away, something like that, and we put collars on them, and within a week or two they're right back where they started. So relocation really isn't a good tool.
Even if
My
you
bear
take
you
them
took
way
away
far away?
never came back. You took away my good bear at Smuggler. I saw you taking it down the highway.
Yep, and the reason we put collars on is to prove what's happening to these bears. Are they getting hit on the highway? Are they getting killed by another bear? Something like that. And of the collars we put out, this is all anecdotal information, but they came back.
I
We
didn't
can't,
invite
like-
him back.
You
So-
can't take them to Montana or Washington or.
Montana doesn't want our
We
bears.
could trade them for wolves. maybe.
Texas. We can send them down to Texas.
So Greg, you still have your hand up. Did you have another question before I get to mine?
Well, so I'm still trying to understand it. What do other urban areas that have landfills and bear problems do? And what does a place like Yellowstone do? I guess I just always heard that, don't feed the bears. And if we're feeding them and they're becoming super bears because they're getting all this nutrition and they're having more cubs, it seems like we're just putting off a problem that's going to get worse. Nobody likes the thought of euthanizing bears, and I don't know if that's the only option, but it seems to me that the longer we wait to figure this out, the more expensive and more difficult it's going to get. And I'm just wondering if we could come up with a plan as we expand the landfill, to start planning for having a landfill we can be proud of regarding feeding wildlife and harboring wildlife, because I don't know any wildlife expert or naturalist or public wildlife manager who would advocate for such access to human trash as a food source for any animal.
So
Best practices is the question. Sorry for that.
yeah, and I would want to find out what they're doing other locations. I have a couple of thoughts. One, what happens? I don't think the electric fence is going to work personally. There will be bears getting inside somehow or other. And I'm reminded of friends who had a pig who they named Genius, who was always on the wrong side of the electric fence. And they watched this pig, and the charger would go click, click, click. And right when it was between the clicks, the pig would go through the fence. And he was always on the wrong side. And I can imagine bears learning to do that same thing.
I love that.
At the airport, we have a bear-proof fence at the airport, basically, and then a bear got out on the runway, and that created, I think, no end of problems hurting it out of there somehow. And I think that would eventually, or maybe it would happen all the time at the landfill, they would go around to the gate, and when the gates open with traffic going in and out, the bears probably would figure that out and they'd go up the road or something. They would figure something out. So to me, the fence isn't necessarily the solution. Now I'm thinking maybe a solution would be changing how we treat the trash. And if we had a waste to energy kind of a thing where we're burning all of the stuff that's in the trash that is probably what the bears are eating, and burning that and producing electricity with it, maybe that would remove the attraction for the bears to go and eat it. And maybe we should look at, it might be in other countries, but what happens in the countries that have the waste to energy process at their landfills, and do they have any bear issues there? Maybe you still have a bear issue, I don't know, but I think that would be worth considering as a long-term option rather than spending $1 million. Now, I've maintained a lot of electric fence, and I know everything that can go wrong with it. Division of Wildlife had the fence, it was an electric fence around the bighorn sheep up on Toner Creek on the frying pan. And they eventually got through, and then they spread out all over Basalt Mountain, and just didn't try to herd them back in there, because once they were out, the fence was breached. And I can envision similar things happening on this fence with lots of goalies and everything.
Steve will be looking for a job next year.
Yeah.
Fence maintainer.
And Steve, keep in mind, it's not just trash at the landfill. One of our primary constituents for making compost is food waste. So the bears that I've seen at the landfill are in the food waste.
Okay,
Yeah, that's what I was
and
gonna ask.
so
What are they eating?
in the
Are they
one you
paying
were
for it?
talking about, you're talking about the working face, but it seemed like you weren't talking about the composting operation. And I would imagine they would all be at the composting operation. So maybe we could fence out the composting operation, and that would be the majority of the food.
It's during the day in the food waste. Typically in the evening, all that has to be composted. Now, sometimes they don't get to it, but typically they try and get it mixed up into the windrows. And so that's what drives the bears down to the working face in the evening. Yeah.
So that could be fencing the composting operation, a much shorter distance of fence and easier to maintain, maybe would solve part of the problem. Then when they're at the working face, do they actually start digging down into the
cover.
like making big pits down in the working face, and because
Yeah.
they can smell something good down in there?
Yeah, regulatory wise, we are required to cover with 6 inches of soil, which is really expensive. So we have alternative spray on and everything. Even when the evenings we use the 6 inches of soil, they'll dig through it.
I'm sure.
Yeah, so that it's not a huge barrier to them.
Patty?
My added concern about fencing, electric fencing, is wildfire. You have a spark or something, it's all scrub oak up there, it gets really dry, and I think we do not want that to happen. So for me, the fencing issue is off the table for all the reasons that you've heard here. As far as the landfill in Leadville in Lake County, they used to, I don't know if they continue to do this, what they did about their bears was they put them on display, and they put up bleachers, and you could pay to come in one night a week and watch the bears. And people would come out there and sit and watch the bears.
I would do that.
Yeah, I know. And apparently it was extremely entertaining. So, but I don't know if we necessarily want to do that at our landfill, but, because Leadville's not that far away, we could always go
So
over there.
one other thought about the electric fence, I wouldn't do solar charger, I would have it hooked up to perhaps a 240 volt system. Which, Wyland Kittle had that up on, on their ranch there where the golf course is now. Just to keep the cattle never went through it when it was that voltage. That was just like a single strand, and the cattle wouldn't go near it to get on the other side. It's a lot more powerful, and maybe it'd be a 120 volt system probably would be effective, but I think that would work better than relying on a solar charger, which I use solar charger a lot for, when I get away from where there's a power source. But then so much can go wrong that you don't get as strong of a charge, and then the cattle or the bears or whoever gets through the fence when the system's down for a little bit.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I think Kelly was ahead. Did you have a question?
Francie?
Oh, no, I do have a question, but I can go last.
My question is, what about other wildlife? So if the 7 strands, maybe that's to discourage like coyotes and badgers and those kind of things. But I mean, if we had 2 strands, is there a problem with other animals going in, squirrels and other animals that might be attracted to the landfill?
I mean, ideally, we wouldn't like any wildlife in there, right? But I think our main concern here is the bears and the issues that they have.
If we had fewer strands to save my construction costs and electricity and all of that, it's okay for coyotes to come and go, and squirrels and mice, and there's probably a billion mice in there right now anyway, so.
Yeah, I mean, so you're gonna have a strand towards the ground to discourage any burrowing or anything like that, which would also deter coyotes and smaller animals. And then the mid strand is if they try to climb, they get shocked there. So anything above mid is pointless because they get shocked before they get to
Getting
the
up
top
there.
anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And if you're looking at keeping out smaller varmints and stuff, it's going to be the wire and the holes in the wire that you put up that's going to, disallow ingress and egress of those
Oh,
animals.
so it's gonna be electric wire and mesh wire?
It would have to be, yeah.
Oh.
So it'd be like the highway fence, something like that, with electric outside of it.
Oh, no wonder it's so expensive.
Yeah, that was just,
So Kelly?
I think Greg has had his hand up, and then I can go.
Okay.
Thank you.
I didn't know if Greg was just leaving his hand up permanently or.
No, it's been going up and down, Steve, but thank you. So I think it seems like we're getting a little bit in the weeds because we all have opinions on whether electric fences work or whether they light things on fire or whether they should be solar. What I think they actually do is they reduce the percentage of wildlife getting into the attractive nuisance. So it's not perfect, but I'd have to say there'd probably be a lot more bears and elk on the runway if we didn't have the fences at the airport, and I think the same would happen with the landfill. I also understand that some bears have been hit by cars right down below the landfill on the highway. So there's an additional hazard or an attractive nuisance near, if this is becoming a corridor for the bears to come in from the river to the landfill and back, we've actually got a hazard that could harm human life and property as well as the bears. I really think that I'd like to have I know this is not rocket science. This is a problem that exists probably in every mountain community on the planet. And I'm hoping that we can understand what works and find out where the best practices are and what the best options are. And I don't think we know an optimal solution yet, but I hope we keep looking. Because I don't anticipate this getting better. If these bears are super bears, on all this great nutrition, and they're having 5 babies instead of 1 or 2,
yeah, we got to
it seems that this is a problem that's not going to go away. And so I'm just hoping we can focus on a good solution, and maybe it takes a couple more years, but that would be my wish for it. And I guess I wanted to ask again, have we looked at all the other solutions? The leadfill model doesn't work for me, Patty. If, maybe we can get the ski company to sell tickets to come see the bears at our dump. But that, to me is almost,
Add on to
as a
X
wildlife advocate, is kind of absurd. And
You
I'm
do know
hoping
I
you all
was just
agree.
kidding, Greg.
So that was kind of the Yellowstone model in the old days. People would go, that was a evening spectacle, I think. They go and feed the bears the garbage from the day, and then all the tourists would go to watch all the bears, and they had to totally change their operations. So let's look at what Yellowstone did as a solution to theirs. I think might help us. Kelly?
Is this population of bears like generational? I mean, is it like the same family of bears, or they like are new bears sort of fighting? And I guess I asked that because I'm like, should we sterilize the bears and just sort of have a plan over time to reduce the population, or is there new bears are wandering in? Do we know?
I would say, without knowing 100%, for the most part, it's going to be generational. They're denning close by, they're living there, and that's the closest food source, and that's where they're going. If there's a bear that's wandering through and it catches wind of it, it's definitely going there.
Literally catches wind of it.
Yeah. And then the other concern I would have is Aspen Village. If we keep these bears out of here, we need to have serious conversations with them, and the type of houses they live in, the trash containers they have, keeping bears out, because now we have all these bears that are habituated that are going somewhere else, and the amount of damage and potential life-threatening situations that are going to occur because of it, it's going to be an issue.
Okay. I'm
Rick's
going
hand
to
is
call
back
on
up.
our guests in the back of the room. Have you looked at any research
You need
that
to
you
come
could
up
share
to a
with
mic.
us about what has been done in other communities? And if you could come up to the mic, one or the other of you. Michael, it looks like you're the one wanting to do the presentation, because you have a level of expertise that none of us have.
You need to be over here at a mic, please. I didn't know we were going to do public comment. So
No, I think they're like
expert
experts,
kind of-
and I
Well,
called on them.
Go
So
ahead, sit
sit down at the mic and introduce yourself, Michael, and
I'm Michael Bear. Um,
Same spelling.
And I work with Daniela Cole. And our expertise in our organization is designed to be on the human side of this. So he's our expert on the animal side of it. What we do offer is through Daniela's connections, she's tied in with a gentleman named Jeff. Anyway, he has Margot Supply, and he's done over 50 landfills. So as far as expertise that we can offer, I think the best thing we can simply say is maybe we can set you up with an opportunity to meet with him, because with his vast experience, he could tell you the successes and what caused problems and what the outcome were of over 50 different landfills, which I think would be the most value that we could bring to the table at this point.
so maybe if you could get the contact, or maybe you already have his contact information, but
Yeah.
if we could get that information to how to contact him, I think that would be good for you to follow up on, just to get more information.
What do you guys do?
Well, we, our goal is to educate, basically. We provide bear-resistant trash cans, especially to people that can't afford them. Daniela should be participating in this. But, we provide flyers and information. We have done the farmers market several times last year. We're going to do it, I think, every other week almost, or this year, to get information out to people. Our goal is to educate the human side of the equation, because that's where the problem is. The problem isn't with the bears, the problem's with us.
So you're trying to mitigate bear-human conflicts.
Correct. And Daniela
Yes,
can give you more detail. on
I'm
what we do.
Daniela Cole, and I started the Roaring Fork Valley Bear Coalition. And
Can you hear her?
Can you talk up louder?
yes,
It's not so much into the mic, it's
is
into
it
the
on
room.
or yeah, it's okay. Anyway, I started the Roaring Fork Valley Bear Coalition. I saw there was a great need for people to be informed and educated, and basically learn how to become bear. How to learn to be bear safe and bear wise, and just learn. We have to learn how to bear proof neighborhoods, homes, mobile homes, entire communities like Lazy Glen, which has been done now with some trash cans from the Pitkin County from a grant from CPW, which we're very grateful for. And I think there's a lot we can do. And the landfill is obviously an issue. I saw this summer 2 bears in one day. And I also support Roaring Fork Safe Passages because I think it's all correlated and intertwined between the accidents that you see on the road from wildlife, and then also wildlife that's up in the landfill. And I find there are bears and elk, and they're sort of just like feeding off this. I have pictures that people send me from Wildcat, and it's very emotional to see that because it's these animals that are beautiful animals, and they are here in a big, like a pond, like a swimming pool. They're taking a bath, and then you have maybe 20 bears or less than 20, but I'm sure there's probably over 30 bears in there. When you see a number, there's probably double. And then you see an elk with the whole bunch of bears in there too. And I can share all these photos with all of you if you would like. And also I have on my board a person that works in North America, and he worked in Yellowstone in major places in Canada as well. His office is also in the US, and they are specialized in electric fencing. It has nothing to do with us. We just would like to help and show maybe there are solutions, and maybe they don't have to be at a very high price. But like Greg Poshman was saying, I think we're just pushing the can down the road, and I think there's a lot we can do. And we are willing to go into every neighborhood between the Aspen Airport all the way down to Aspen Village, and we'll do the same door-to-door, boots on the ground. And I have all my flyers. They have been done since day one in Spanish and English, and I give a lot of help to the community. I give out electrified doormats that we got, and they're easily to install actually, and they're super expensive, but you don't need to ground them, so you don't need to get like into trouble, and nothing's going to happen to you as long as you wear shoes. So we hear about a break-in, we give those mats out to people as loaners, or they can buy it. So we have an enormous amount of tools that we actually use to mitigate bear break-ins, because once, let's say, you solve the trash problem or the landfill problem, the bears might break into homes. They might want to break into places, into car break-ins. I think this happened actually in Missoula just recently. And so I think there's tons of things we can do. And I'm willing, because I work boots on the ground every day, all day long. If I have to, I can do that. We can all do that. We work with Boy Scouts. Mike and Lynn are helping me in a lot of different things. And yeah, we get a lot of input, and we work with CPW as well. We do not do anything that they're not agreeing with us, or, that would not be within their policy. And we also educate ourselves constantly.
Okay.
So sorry about this
Thanks for-
informal presentation.
Thanks for the information, and I just extend an invitation. If you have any suggestions or ideas, feel free to maybe write them down and get them to Brian Pettit at Public Works, or send them to the BoCC. I think we need to get more educated. It sounds like to me, Kathy, some good ideas for stuff to follow up on. I'm not ready to give a thumbs up or thumbs down to the your different proposals at this point, but I personally would need more information to make the right decision.
Yeah, sounds good. We can continue collecting options and ideas.
Michael?
I just think that a conversation with Jeff, the gentleman who's done over 50 landfills, would probably be the best way for us to help you with the next steps, because then you could ask him a ton of questions, and you could get a lot of information from his experience. So whether we set that up as a conference call in your next work session or with Kathy or what we do, I think that's what we would recommend you start with.
And I think probably you communicating with him and then bringing
Yeah.
information to us.
Will do, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Ellie?
Thank you
Yeah,
for
I would, I think, I support continued exploration of a solution, and, I think before it would come back, if fencing starts to develop as, you know, a desirable path, like I'd like to understand what the more comprehensive solution related to some of the things that you talked about bear-proofing neighborhoods looks like, in partnership, hopefully, as well as what this type of funding request looks like against the rest of the priorities at the landfill for us to consider. Because it's a big request, it's a big chunk of our budget, and I'd have to look at it in comparison to the other things that we're hoping to get done out there too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That would be my direction.
Thanks,
I don't know.
Kathy and Curtis
to
and
see you
Ryan
guys.
and our guests for educating us. I think I've learned something new every week I've been a commissioner for 11 years.
I want to know what time the show starts out of the landfill.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Curtis, good to see you. How's that baby?
It's always stressful.
How old?
That was super interesting.
Kindergarten
Thank you, Curtis.
soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Still, I'm curious if we can sterilize those bears.
Okay, next up on our agenda, we have Strategic Communications Plan presentation. And our esteemed communications expert team led by Marcy is here.
Yes, and I brought along some guests as well. Actually, Dave, do you want to?
Wherever you're comfortable.
Maybe sit at that one.
There'll be a seat too, Marcy. You can take the one with the computer. If you
Okay.
give it to Abby. I already have mine.
I've got, oh, you put it on it.
Did you
I
print?
can't read all this on a computer. I have to print it out.
Thank you. We do have printouts.
Yeah,
You want
yeah, if
one,
you could
Steve?
pass those around or
Okay.
just hand them over, Marcy, thank you.
Sure.
I did look at it online, but I'm like Patty.
You get blurry-eyed after
Paper.
the first 12 paragraphs.
You want?
Oh,
Really, Francie?
no, I'm okay. I have one online. Thank you.
What is it?
It's the plan.
It's the plan that was
Yes, I'll take one.
in our packet too.
Yes, okay. Sorry, I'm a little out of it. I don't know where's that at. No.
Okay, Marcy, take it away
Okay.
and talk loudly. Some of us up here are hard of hearing.
I'm very curious who it is that doesn't like the Oxford comma. Is that you?
That was not me. I noticed that too.
That's
I
I'm
debated
a
what.
big fan of the Oxford comma, so.
I am too, and I debated whether to go in and add it everywhere, but I didn't do it. All right. So, Rosa, do you want me to run it, or do you want to run the slideshow? Oh, I'd love it if you. Okay. So you need to sit here now. So Abby, I'm sorry.
Abby, I'll switch chairs.
Musical chairs. It's like I guess I'll come in. All right. So before we get started, I just want to introduce our team. Of course, you know the community relations team, which is Abby Cheney and Rosa Saucedo and myself. And then we have Dave Levin here and Rachel Brenneman as well, and Tracy Truelove, I think, is online. But the three of them made up our consultant team who helped us create this strategic communications plan, which we're presenting to you today. And really the goal today is just to give you a glimpse at what we've created and to talk a little bit about, we'll go into detail on it and talk a little bit about how we're already sort of rolling it out. So, Rosie, you can go ahead and switch slides. So, a little bit of context, a little bit of background. When I first started at the county, there was a desire voiced by leadership to undertake developing this strategic communications plan, primarily because the county had learned so much about effective communications during the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, the Community Relations Department was evolving with new leadership and additional employees, Rosa and Abby. And what operated as a department of one for decades is now a team of 3 full-time permanent employees, and the time was right to work to improve communications and engagement for the county. So we got to work with the help of Tracy, Rachel, and Dave. We set out to understand how communications were currently being done. We worked with our consultant team to pore over previous employee and community surveys and met with key people in the organization like Ashley Pearl, who's spearheading the county's equity, diversity, and inclusion effort. And we did nearly a dozen internal listening or discovery sessions with departments, which was very interesting in terms of the feedback we received. So you can go on to the next one. So we heard several things and just a few quotes, and keep going with it. Yeah, thanks, Rosa. Some of the themes we heard during these discovery sessions were that strategic planning around communications works. We heard from Open Space and Trails, who really prioritized this several years ago. We heard a desire to be more intentional with communications. We heard that from the sheriff's office, and just a few other quotes here. And then we also heard around internal communications for employees that it's confusing to know where to find information because so many platforms are utilized to push information out. And we heard that the public is confused on how to get the information they need. We heard that from community development. And we also heard that there's a lack of capacity and time to do outreach and a lack of knowledge about what will be most effective. So we had the departments do a self-evaluation, and that's what this bar chart shows, the results of that. This was part of our discovery sessions with the departments. And participants were asked, how well is your department communicating with your audiences on a scale of 1 to 10? And as you can see, the chart represents somewhat of a standard bell curve with most people landing in the middle with the sentiment of we are doing okay, but we could definitely do better. And you can see some other comments that we heard. Communication isn't a priority in my job. We have room for improvement. It always feels reactive. We don't have the expertise but want to learn. We need help with the how and the why. And I do want to point out...
Marcy, could you just, sorry, Marcy.
Oh, it's okay.
Could you just explain the scale on the chart? I'm trying to figure out what's 1 to 10 and what's 0 to 8, sorry.
So I think maybe the most important takeaway in terms of the numbers is that the majority of people were in the middle, Greg, with a 2.5 or a 3 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Does that sound right?
Yep, that's
okay.
Right.
Okay, so does this represent individual people, each bar? Or I'm sorry. I'm just trying to figure out what is the x-axis and what's the y-axis. I'm daft on this.
No problem, Greg. This is Rachel. So basically, we talked to 35 people-ish, and we asked them on a scale of 1 to 5. We said, how well is your department doing? And they said, I feel like a 2.5. We said, okay, well, you can complicate it if you want to. But the idea is basically we met with groups of people. This is each individual representing how well they think that their department is doing. Does that make sense? So the one, ignore
And
the
which
1 to
axis
10.
is which? Give me the y-axis then, and sorry, the 2.5 is how well they're doing. Okay, that's
Greg,
the-
Greg, this
Correct.
is Dave. I'll just jump in. I think we have our axes confused here. There doesn't need to be a vertical axis, just an x-axis. So on the left is 0, on the right should be 10. So the 0 to 8, please don't look at that. That seems like it's a mistake at the
So
moment.
those are bins, how many people were in each area?
Yeah.
So nobody gave a 10 as the top score and 8.
Pretty much, yeah. Yep.
Your mic.
Steve, your mic's not on.
Okay, thanks. We can move on. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
So incorporating equity, diversity, and inclusion, like I mentioned, we visited with Ashley Pearl, who's leading the EDI efforts internally for the county. And really, it's just essential that we are inclusive in our internal and external communications and engagement efforts. So you'll see EDI tactics are included in the strategic planning methodology for departments. It's sort of weaved into both the external and internal plans within this overarching document. So our guiding principle, if you want to go on to the next one, Rosa. After all of this discovery work, the community relations team in collaboration with our consultant team came up with the guiding principle, or North Star, for successful strategic countywide communication and engagement. Essentially, people have the information, resources, and services they need when they need it. And this goal is woven throughout the 3 plans we created: the external plan, the internal plan, and the community relations roadmap, which are all wrapped into this document that you have in front of you. It's the overarching aim for the entire county, and it's a way of thinking about and conducting communication and engagement that will facilitate a shift from the current blanket approach, all information to everyone, to a more project or campaign-based process that's intentional. And ultimately, the plan's goal is to help the county work in a more proactive, intentional way when it comes to communication and engagement, which will ultimately better serve our constituents and external stakeholders as well as county employees. So with that, we're going to jump into the first plan that's included in this document, which is the external plan, and I'll toss it to Rachel.
Thank you, Marcy. So yeah, we've got 3 parts of the plan. We've got external, internal, and then the CR strategic operating plan. I'm just going to dive into the external and internal briefly with an overview of current state goals and objectives. And then Marcy will chime in with some color and some details. And if you guys have questions afterwards, we're happy to dive into the details. We didn't want to get too far in the weeds today, but we'll give you a pretty broad understanding of what this plan is all about. So external plan, the overview is it's really a plan for successful 1- and 2-way communication and engagement for people who work in, live in, and visit Pitkin County. So I think there's a couple important things to point out there. The 1- and 2-way communication, 1 is obviously just giving people information, and 2 is really sparking that dialogue, asking for feedback, and that's more of the engagement piece, right? And something that we really want to highlight. I think that communications has been something that the county has done over the past 30 years or so, but the engagement is a little bit new, and we want to bring that a little bit higher up on everybody's radar. And then the who, sorry, that's the other one. Thanks, hon. The who, go back to, perfect. The who is work in, live in, and visit, right? So we're talking businesses, we're talking visitors, we're talking residents, obviously. And then we're talking about a bunch of other groups as well. Local agencies, CDOT, City of Aspen, Town of Snowmass Village, partner organizations like ACRA and the schools, the media, community groups. I mean, so we really have a pretty wide audience when we talk about external. So the current state, I think Marcy did a pretty good job of explaining like where we are right now. Historically, we've had one person in the community relations department for 3+ decades. It's obviously a very decentralized organization, 39 departments, each working almost as its own business entity with different brands and whatnot. And then there's limited resources. And we're not just talking about money. We're talking about time. We're talking about know-how in terms of how to actually execute communication. So the sum of that is that we have somewhat of reactive department-based communication and engagement with costly contractor support. So the goal is to resource county staff and vendors to more effectively communicate and engage with the public for measurable impact. So the success that we're looking for is really communication and engagement impact is increased across external audiences. The greater public satisfaction with the process of engagement, greater public satisfaction with ease of getting information they want. So the community satisfaction survey is going to be a great tool to really measure this and benchmark it. And we plan to work with Marcy and her team to make sure there's questions in there that can really see what kind of progress we're making year over year. Next slide. So the objectives, this is a how, right? So these 6 things are going to be super important on a high level of knowing the difference between communication and engagement, when to use what tool, that departments serve constituents better through intentional strategic work, really thinking about the year ahead and what projects they have on the docket and how communication and engagement can support those. And then the CR team really leading, advising, and resourcing departments. Right now, we kind of have this internal joke about they're the Taco Bell, drive-through window where people just want something. They say, hey, I need a brochure, and they bust it out as fast as they can, and then the department moves on. So we're really wanting to zoom out and help departments think through what they're doing and how communications can support it on a little bit of just a more intentional level. So then we're also talking about all departments have an employee to project manage communication and engagement. Marcy will talk about that a little bit more. Improving efficiency through transparency, and of course EDI plays a big role. Do you want to chime in with a little color?
Sure, yeah. You want to go back a slide, Rosie? Yeah, so I'm not sure if you all had a chance to dive into the objectives and the strategies and the tactics that are outlined in the different plans, but we have pinpointed some ways to sort of capitalize on the limited number of people within the community relations team in order to support departments. So I actually have already presented this plan to the directors and managers, and part of my goal in that presentation was to really enlist their support and get on board for ensuring that the people who are sort of assigned to the various communications tasks within their departments are part of our countywide communicators group, so that our team who leads that group can empower those folks to lead the charge, and we can advise them and train them, but they can take some of the responsibility for communicating on behalf of their departments. So just training them up, trying to meet their needs and working closely with them. So that's really one of the tactics, and there's more detail with it within the plan itself. For number 4, that's listed there. And then I think, personally, I think one of the biggest objectives that's part of the external plan is working on creating strategic communications plans with the various departments. So like Rachel mentioned, being more proactive, identifying the communications and engagement needs with these departments, and maybe unearthing communications needs that they may not even recognize they had. And at the same time, strategic work is sort of, you think of it as being opposite of that drive-through menu, that more reactive work, but inevitably that's just part of local government, so that will continue. We're just hoping that we can be more intentional with what we know is coming, but inevitably, we'll continue to tackle those things that just come up because that's the nature of the county. So.
I think the combination of two of the things that Marcy highlighted, this working strategically with the departments as well as this communicators group, and the ultimate goal is to have eyes in on what the whole county is doing in terms of communication, right? So if Open Space and Trails is out there talking to folks and, another department has to do the same with the same audience, there's some economies of scales if we understand that both of those needs are happening at the same time, right? So ultimately, we're hoping to create this like county-wide document that has all of the departments and all of the communications projects they're working on, and so we can see where's the overlap, how can we work together, where are the economies of scale and efficiencies, and so we're not going to the community with the same things or asking the same questions to similar groups. So just it comes across as being more informed and more aware of what's happening in your own organization.
And I would mention one other thing is just the ability to recognize what communication tool should be used for specific projects, whether it's more engagement or communication, whether it's more of that two-way dialogue with the community or more of an information pushing out of information sharing.
So internal, pretty simple. A plan for communicating to all the Pickens County employees. So that includes the admin team, the manager's office, directors, managers, employees, as well as professional contractors and vendors, as well as the BoCC. So this is images used for dramatic representation, but the idea is that internal communication right now is a bit of a tidal wave. It's kind of a tsunami. There's tons of it. It is on lots of different platforms. We've got the PCIN, we've got the employee newsletter, we've got HR emails, we've got all county emails, we've got the HR website, we've got the Pickens County website. So there's a lot happening there, and the feedback that we heard from people is that they're not sure where to find the information that they need, and sometimes they miss information just because there's so much of it. So you couple that with this dynamic of there's 39 departments working at 12 different locations. So the dark blue on this bar graph, a little bit more than half are people that are basically work on a computer most of the day. So they're either in the office or at home a couple days a week. And then the light blue are people that are on site, people that are driving trucks, working at facilities and whatnot. And so they're at a location. So kind of the moral of this slide is there isn't one way to reach all of the employees. We really need to have a diversified approach. I remember, I think it was someone at Public Works that said, if it's not on a flyer and on a bulletin board, then our people aren't going to get it. So we can't simply rely on email and digital communication. So the goal is to develop an informed, engaged, county-wide workforce through a valuable internal communication framework. So the idea is framework of structure and priorities and getting people information that they need. Through these 4 simple objectives: simplify and align internal communications across the organization, really developing prioritization methods to increase information overwhelm, whether that's a monthly theme or some way to really kind of funnel that information, making employee information easy to find and accessible. We've talked about not a new platform per se, but maybe just a web page that would ping you to the information that you need as more kind of a portal or a landing page. And really, again, the EDI lens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say that we've already started down the road of working to improve internal communications, and we actually have a kickoff meeting with HR and community relations next week to first just focus on improving our existing tools like the employee newsletter. But ultimately, the internal plan within the document lists more aspirational, potentially further out into the future goals. But I think just figuring out, what piece of information should belong on what platform, because we do have so many platforms. So almost creating a kind of vetting process or more of an editorial oversight of in decision making around that. And then creating a list of questions to guide individual communication that may include, what's the purpose of this communication you want to put out internally? Who needs to know? What's the easiest way to communicate with your audience in the fewest steps? So just working, more closely on, as we have been with employees, to figure out where their internal communication might work best.
One last thing I'll add is just this idea of improving communication between the different kind of layers of employees as well, in terms of like leadership to directors, to managers, to staff, and ultimately to you guys. So this idea of maybe of the managers' chats, bringing back toolkits for the directors, but just wanted to throw that out as an example of the kind of the level of detail that the plan does entail. I'll hand it over to you, Dave.
Thanks. So a lot of that was what's going to happen and what the plan looks like. Big question, who's in charge? Who's going to help move this forward over time? And that really is the Community Relations Department, Marcy and her team, with the support from leadership. So what they're going to do is they're going to lead, advise, and resource the county and the county's vendors in creating higher quality and more impactful communications and engagement. So what we're going to look at here in the next few slides is a little bit of the shift from where the department came from, where they're going to put their time, what they're going to aim to do, and basically what happens next, even though Marcy's already been moving this forward a little bit. So in the past, on the left, you can see that in the, what are we going to call that color? Mustard, thank you. Okay, great. Mustard, orange. That's this drive-up window approach of, hey, we need something from you. Most of their time historically as a department has been fulfilling needs and requests and answering to them. There have been some improvements that have been done. We're giving that about 5%. And there have been some strategic communications, engagements, and campaigns that have been done, whether that has come from BoCC and leadership. There definitely have been some strategic, forward-thinking things being done. But the majority of their work was just taking requests, and that was indicative of one person being in that department for a long time. Now with the growth of the department, moving to a more intentional way of being, the proposed 2-year time frame, and this is as a department overall, about half their time is going to be more intentional. What's going to really serve the community and the constituents? Which things are a priority to communicate about? Where should they be putting their energy for engagement and make sure the public has a voice and feels heard and supported moving towards a decision? A big bulk on the right-hand pie chart is going to be these organizational improvements. About 25% of their time is going to need to be put towards things like change management, helping other teams really learn how to work better together, putting together documentation, and a variety of other things to help other people get those resources they need.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
So 25% of their work is spent on how to work better rather than actually working.
Yes. Now, let me ask you all a question, because I've not really participated in a lot of these meetings. I can answer that question now, or should we just hold that to Q&A?
I want to answer for that question now.
Great, perfect.
I kind of feel the same way.
Great, happy to do that. So the thing about it is you've got 3 people who are serving 39 departments. They can't do all the work themselves. So being able to take their time to be able to help resource and train other departments in getting work done that they can't handle is going to make it an even more ability to do better communications engagement across the county. So without anybody leading that, without anybody taking the time to do that, communication engagement is not going to improve across the county. You're going to get a limited amount from these 3 people. So putting that energy there in terms of creating those improvements and helping other people learn how to actually do things, and a lot of that still will rely on external vendors because that's what's happening right now, but doing that in a more consistent way, even though it's decentralized.
In the short run.
In the short run. So that's proposed in the next 2 years. You're going to see, and from the 3 to 5 year window, that time frame of the investment, like the foundation of how to do this well, is going to shrink significantly.
Okay.
So maybe it would have been easier if you saw all three of them up there at the same time.
Yeah, maybe. It's just, it's fine.
It's an investment in everybody's success and doing better in a decentralized model.
Steve?
Yeah, go ahead.
But on this page, on the paper copy, there's language that says, the ability to say no to most requests from departments while relying on contract support. So that means we're gonna keep hiring people from out to come in, and we're gonna rely on more dollars going to contracts with outside vendors to help us with communications? I'm really confused.
I'm not sure that that's more dollars or more support. So there already are dollars in support being utilized by the team and by teams across the county.
Right, but I thought this was to help us so we didn't have to rely on contracting out, that we could bring this work in-house. Because I think that's a better benefit to the county than saying, oh, we're gonna do this plan and we're just gonna hire people to come in and fulfill it.
Yeah, so we brought some, but not all in. And so that, Patty, that was some of the budget conversation this year.
Right.
So when we have particular campaigns and such, we're still hiring folks to help us put those together and do, for example, graphic design work and that sort of thing, or campaign design, or it could be facilitation. But we are not doing as much as we would if we had a one-person department.
Well, I know, because that's why
Yeah.
we supported three
Right.
great people.
Right.
The other thing is that we already have staff throughout the county who's saying they're overworked. Are we giving them one more job to do, which is to do communication and engagement? We're just gonna train them how to do it?
Well, we're doing, it's a little bit of a yes and.
That's what I thought, John.
Yeah. We're doing more with our team here and supporting departments, but there are still department-specific outreach efforts. So, for example, Open Space and Trails
Well, they've been
still
doing
has-
theirs for years, and they do a great job.
Yeah, and you know, I'd anticipate Marcy spending a lot of time with the airport, but as we get into more public process, we may need some more support there as we go forward, that sort of thing.
Well, I think what I'm feeling as a member of the Board of County Commissioners, that a lot of communication goes out and I don't hear about it. I hear about it on the street or in the paper or somewhere else, without, like, press releases go out, and you've gotten better about sending us the press releases going out so that when the press calls us, we don't say, what are you talking about? That's not a good position to put a member of this board in. Mm-hmm. And we should not be put in that position when we don't know what's happening in the county. And especially things that go out with press releases or hot topics that are brewing within our departments, because it gets out and it comes back to us. We're the ones who get phone calls, and we're the ones who don't necessarily sit in front of a computer all day, but people think we do.
Right.
But, you know, we're out and about. That's our jobs. So we've got to figure out a way then, I think, to help manage that level of communication directly to the BoCC. Mm-hmm. So we do a good enough job sometimes ourselves, making ourselves look foolish. We don't need any help. I was going to use another word there, but I didn't. But so we need to make sure that we are integral into this process, mm-hmm. because we need to know.
Yeah. So if it's okay, let me kind of put a context on this and walk us through a few slides, and then if you still have questions, be happy to answer some.
Okay.
So one of the things that's important that we discovered was that there's kind of a lot of wasted energy and time from personnel across the county doing communications. Not everything that is being done is effective or important to be done. So one of the things one of the questions we're aiming to answer through this process of improvement is not necessarily just more for more, but let's figure out what's really important to work on and put energy there and see if we can collaborate on our energies towards that. So that's part of some of those improvements. So let's go to the next slide for a moment. Actually, back up one. There should be two pie charts. No, okay, so we're in a different framework. That's fine. We can go to
There's
this.
the
We can go
other,
to this
the third 3
next
to
one.
5 year one that
Yeah,
didn't show.
it's fun. We can go back one. We can go one more forward. I just got thrown off by the ordering of the 2-year. That one perfectly.
That was it, that second
This is
one
this
was
is
it.
perfect. So in the next 2 years, at a very high level, we've developed a work plan with Marcy for what her team ought to be doing to help the county improve on this in the next 2 years. So we're talking 2 years here. Some of those bigger things are run, manage, and lead the priority communications and engagement projects. And like we said, previously they've been doing about 15% of that for their time, but now we're going to elevate that to 50% of their time. There are priority things that does require this team to put their energy to. They're also going to partner strategically with the departments to identify these high impact constituent opportunities for communication or engagement. We feel that there's some things that have been missed at the moment or not really elevated to this is an important engagement opportunity and really ought to take staff time in how to interface with the community. There's going to develop a system of reporting on how things are actually improving and are they working and are they being effective, as opposed to doing things and then assuming whatever happens. Because right now we don't have good reporting to say, was that effective? Did people feel included in this engagement, or was that communication actually effective for people, or was it just work? So they're going to support staff in knowing how to get support for some of the strategic communications and how to work on campaigns if there are campaigns that come out of these strategic planning. One of the most important things to come out of the next 2 years is the creation of a countywide crisis communications plan. There isn't one for the county right now. Any crisis that happens, kind of an ad hoc, what do we do? How does it go? It's a big gap. It's a big gap. You're really exposed with not having a plan and understanding how to do that, even though you've got some very talented people who can work with that.
There's a crisis every day in the county, just so you know,
Yeah,
at some
right,
level.
Right. So it's a very important part of being prepared.
But like, what are you talking about?
Um,
Like wildfire or something, and how do we communicate with people? What do you mean by that?
Thank you. That's a great segue. I'm going to open up to Tracy Truelove, who is on Zoom right now.
We get Greg first. So can you raise his hand?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Greg
Yes, we can,
but
Tracy.
Greg has a question first, Steve.
Okay, Greg?
Well, yeah, thank you. I think this is where it's going. I had a comment just that with, PIO. What about a PIO during a crisis? How does this work with a PIO, and is it redundant? Is one of my questions, and I think Tracy might be just getting to that now. I don't know. The second question I had, we can parking lot for toward the end is, how often have we been using contractors since COVID? I know COVID, tipped everything over, but since then, I wasn't aware that we had a lot of contractor engagement for communications, and maybe I was just in the dark on that. And then the last thing, I just wanted some clarity, if I could, on something somebody said. It sounded as if we're going to start designing messaging for specific groups. And if we're targeting different groups with different messages, I'm concerned about that because it could get kind of messy if one group hears one thing and one group hears another. And I'm sure that I'm not interpreting that correctly, but I wanted to red flag that. But thank you. Back to the PIO question. Thanks.
Okay, Tracy.
Greg, and
Go
yeah,
ahead.
is it over to me? And Marcy, feel free to jump in here, but great question, Greg. I'm definitely going to address that. So the goal for a crisis comms plan, obviously, is to provide timely, accurate information during and after an emergency. The county is actually very good at this, but it's just like you said, you have so many. It's important to note that Marcy and her team are training as public information officers. They've already done several courses in it. And it's also important to recognize that that PIO role would really work together. Marcy and her team with the Pickens County Incident Management Team ever being deployed. So kind of two different things there. Greg, if I didn't answer that very clearly, I'll go a little bit more into it, definitely, when we talk a little bit more about what this plan overview looks like. And again, a crisis comms plan is really going to create that framework for consistent communication. What we're working on with Marcy right now is the scope of what the crisis comms plan looks like. because what we came to an understanding of is that you ultimately have a need for specific crisis comms plans that meet specific department needs. So we're going to be really working with her on kind of that internal county, kind of even back to what Patty said, like how do we make sure the BoCC is aware something's like elevating to a crisis. There's also great opportunity in this currently because of the change of guard with the new emergency manager coming on board. That's actually a really exciting time, I think, for the county and for Marcy's team on how to be building this out. So, Marcy, do you want to add anything to the public information officer conversation before I jump into a few more things about the crisis comms plan?
I don't think so, Tracy. I think it would be important to also point out that the county has an emergency operations plan. So there's sort of the incident management team, the emergency operations plan. Can you describe a little bit about how this crisis comms plan would be different or work a little bit in tandem?
So you're talking about, okay,
So
let me make sure I understand what you're asking. So when a crisis hits, the county kind of determines when it activates up to the incident management team. With the emergency manager in place, you could operate the emergency operations center and activate the emergency support functions. And there's so many people within the county that are trained in that ESF function. And the way to look at it, and I'm going probably way too in the weeds here, so pull me back out, but you're either functioning in an ICS structure, incident command structure, or in an emergency operations center structure. And if it's an ICS type of structure, that's essentially, I think, when you're going to deploy the incident management team. If it's bringing in different people throughout the county in that emergency support function, that's where the emergency manager can deploy that. And Marcy's team, I think, really is going to be able to move between the two. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Tracy, I wanted to point out that there are things in place already, like the incident management team, if a crisis occurs. Just reminding everyone, this is sort of the crisis communications plan builds sort of on the structure that we already have here at the county.
And I can go a little further to share that kind of the goal or the objectives of the plan are, to provide county leadership with a framework and a process to execute timely and accurate comms, to ensure employees are aware of their potential role in executing the plan. So that's going to be a big part of that internal communications team that Marcy's been working with. The important piece of a crisis comms plan is to protect the image and the reputation of the county. Last thing we want to do, and I think Francie said it with wildfire season coming, is not be prepared and ready to roll in the case we have something like that occur locally. And then a crisis comm plan provides guidance and best practices for your folks on the appropriate content and channels to use. And then the last thing I'd touch on is that the crisis comm plan is really going to identify potential partners and stakeholders in the community and how to enhance your communications efforts.
So if I could add something, in one of our very first, and Tracy and I were in this discovery session together with the airport at the very beginning of this process, and we said to Dan, what happens when there's a crisis? And he's like, well, I typically, and I'm not throwing Dan on the bus at all, but he said, oh, well, we call this person, and then we call this person, then we call this person. We said, great, that's awesome. Is this written down anywhere? Is this kind of process and phone tree and who's responsible for what? Is that in a document somewhere? And he said, no, it's in everybody's head. And so I think maybe the difference between kind of the IMT and the ESF function stuff, that to me seems a little bit more kind of logistical and functional. This is more just like what information needs to go to who and when. So there'll be an internal plan for how to keep all the employees and all of you guys abreast of what's happening. I think that we realized that was a little bit of a miss in the swatting incident at the school recently. And then externally, how do we get that information out to the public and to the stakeholders?
One thing I have noticed that is irritating to me, and that's when there is a Pitkin alert goes out. it's a two-step process to find out what the alert is. You should be able to click on the thing and there's the message, should immediately pop up. But it requires that you go to bit.ly and, you know, click a link to then go to somewhere else, which then you're relying on having a good connection to get that. And so if it's really something that merits being on Pitkin Alert, so it's a, you know, an emergency or a, you know, public safety kind of a question that is really important to get the information out, we should be able to get it the most easy way. You open the thing and there's the message. So that would be, I think, making these crisis communications as one stop, you know, one click to find out the information and not have to make it more complicated would be better. And maybe you don't have anything to do with Pitkin Alert, or maybe you do, I'm not sure. But I've run into other county communications where on about the third step along the way, I give up. I just figure, well, I'm not going to find out this information. And that has happened sometimes.
For me, the Pitkin Alert's the easiest one I have that I get from anything to get to. Everything else sends me to 5 different passwords that I have to find out what they are. Whereas this one, it seems pretty easy. So I think for some it's easy. I don't know if it's just my system on my phone. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I can click right on it and find out what road's closed or, you know, what road's open.
Yeah, and I think this is really good feedback. Part of the crisis communications planning effort, which is in its very early stages, we're just figuring out the scope, will mean working closely with dispatch and the sheriff's office. You know, we've already identified some internal stakeholders who are going to be critical to building this out. So Pitkin Alert, I'm sure, will be discussed as part of this.
Don't break it. It's not broken.
Well, some of your frustrations and things you've noticed, if you can imagine what this is like countywide, not just in crisis stuff, it's kind of going on everywhere.
It goes on everywhere with us. This board.
So part of what we're after is simplifying and streamlining and making this work easier. So just that sentiment that you're sharing are things we've heard as we talk to people in other areas too.
I wanted to mention one more thing before we hop on the next slide too, on the public information officer piece. Marcy's already been doing a phenomenal job of building the Pitkin County PIO group. So we're a team of professionals that know the work, like David Boyd from White River. And Marcy, I don't know if you've talked about that much, but that's a huge undertaking that she and her team have been at, I think, since she started in the position. And it's such an important relationship building, group to be part of in the event that you have an incident occur, because you're going to really rely on some of those people to, again, expand your network. And she's already been doing a fantastic job with that group.
Thank you, Marcy.
So we're looking at pie charts again. I'm assuming there will be plenty of questions. Let me get through this in one more slide and we can do that. So on the slide on the left is kind of what we're aiming for in the next couple of years, which is focusing on moving to, in that dark blue, a much more strategic, intentional way of doing communications and engagement across the county. You see there that the organizational improvements are 25%, hence your question of, putting so much energy into developing what I would consider a foundation of personnel capacity across the county. And what you'll notice in the 3 to 5 year time frame is that time of doing strategic communication and engagement for this team goes way up to 75%. And that time of the organizational improvement goes way down because they put their time and energy in helping people across the county learn how to do better, learn the methodologies, get the documentation in place, get people trained up on how to actually do this work better. You'll notice that the crisis or the reactive work, it doesn't really change. I mean, more or less, it doesn't change because there's always a trickle, if not a heartbeat, of crisis communications that happens all the time. You have to expect that that's going to happen. The energy, another place you'll see an energy shift from this team, in the 3 to 5 year lens as opposed to the 2-year lens is that their attention to how to improve, streamline, and make internal communications better is going to get reduced too, because they've put their work in there. They've done those big improvements. So that's the goal, is in the 3 to 5 year time frame, being much more strategic and intentional for the benefit of county constituents, internal employees, and other stakeholders. Some of the outcomes in that 3 to 5 year time frame are these refined methodologies and approaches, building on what worked, really learning what worked and what didn't for the county specifically. Better educated staff and vendors on how to use these updated approaches, so that in a decentralized model, people are kind of working similarly as opposed to more different. That really that way of doing better communication engagement is happening across the county. More modernized ways of doing work, such as platforms and technology, even answering some of the questions, maybe answering some of the questions of why do you need multiple clicks just to get an alert. Maybe that'll be answered in that time frame, right? But that's some of those things. Streamlining and making more impactful internal communications so that people are less confused and they get the information they need. Also coming up with these department success case studies. The more that there's a culture built around, hey, we did a great job with our constituents and our people in the county, it's going to encourage other people to want to do that and want to be like that. And that's how things are going to improve as far as through people, not because communication and engagement happen by people doing this work. And that departments and leaders experience measurable improvements.
Oh yes, here's my wrap up. So with spring on the way, we can look at this effort as kind of a renewal or sort of a new day for county communications and engagement. This plan represents an evolution in the way we think about how to ensure our efforts are effective and inclusive. This change requires a deep commitment of enrolling people in a new way of working, creating a culture of strategic prioritization, and creating a culture of learning by daylighting the concept of doing for impact versus doing to do. And then finally, I just pulled this from sort of the opening letter in the document in front of you. And I'll just read it and you can follow along. As the county grapples with controversial projects and issues, as is the nature of local government, we need to continue to strive to provide not only transparent communication, but ways to foster two-way dialogue and solicit feedback so community members feel included in decisions and trust that they will not be left in the dark. This responsibility lies not with community relations, not only with community relations, but with other county staff as well. And this charge, again, that North Star, means doing things differently with an eye toward a future where people have the information, resources, and services they need when they need it. And that is our presentation. And I know Greg had a few questions that went unanswered, and I'm sure there are others. So
I'm good.
You're good? Okay, Kelly?
Yeah, I guess I just have a comment. And one of the things that I'm wondering, you know, our staff are so dedicated, and I feel like a lot of times they're like, it's like head down. And I'm curious about how we are communicating expectations around outward communications. You know, they know they're serving the public. Everyone's doing an excellent job, but like factoring in, you know, I think some of that it comes more naturally to some departments than others by the virtue of their work or maybe the cyclical natures of their work. You know, like one of the things that comes to mind is like the treasurer and the assessors this year. You know, like we probably should have been thinking like 2 years ago about a real deliberate communications plan related to assessment and taxation. And so just using that as an example, I'm just wondering, like, you know, what should we have a role in articulating leadership to the rest of the organization about an expectation of quality of communication? And, you know, most do it great, but again, it's very decentralized, and you are now going to be like knocking on their door, and I don't know how, like, I don't know what the change management is looking like with, like, okay, like this department, we're here to show up and train you, and we're expecting that you're going to avail yourself of that training. And I'm not sure that should lie with you. Like, you guys are the service delivery to the organization in a way, but you know, if a department is like, well, thanks, but no thanks, like we got way too much going on our plate right now, you know, I don't know. So I mean, maybe I'll look to John a little bit for that. Like, how are we thinking about that? How is that conversation happening in the organization? You know, what should we be playing a role in how this rolls out and the expectations roll out with the larger organization?
I mean,
Do you want to go first, or okay?
Well,
yeah.
I could answer quickly that you're right. It does mean enlisting buy-in from the staff who are doing communications, maybe just as kind of you know, I don't know, a fourth or fifth priority in their job. So we had our kind of kickoff for the year of the county communicators group, which is sort of the way that we're intending to enlist their help, is through this once a month meeting that we have. And we held it in person. It was sort of just a different way of doing things with this particular meeting than we've done in the past. And we did some facilitative leadership during that meeting, really tried to get them involved in deciding what those meetings are going to look like in the future.
Who is that group? I don't know who the communicators group is. Does anybody? Do you guys know what that is?
Well, it's the staff from our departments who, you know, maybe update Facebook or maybe write press releases.
Who's the group? What members? I mean, what departments, or I don't know.
The airport, open space and trails, public works, library. Yeah, we've tried to identify all of those folks in all of the departments to be part of this group. Community development, yeah. So it's a wide
It's a new
swath.
group. I mean, we keep forming new groups all the time, and I never seem to know who they are.
What's your role in that, Abby?
My role, I mean, we work, the three of us as a team, to plan each meeting. We're kind of figuring out the cadence of that right now, but kind of back to what we were saying.
Doesn't have a mic.
Oh.
Here, please take mine.
Kind of back to what we were saying is bringing value and training and intentional planning. So, like, we'll be doing, next month, we'll be doing a discussion on internal communications. Like, what do you hear inside your departments about what's working, what's not working in communications, in internal communications? Does that answer your question? So the three of us kind of plan those meetings and conduct the training and education that goes into that group. So.
And it is a vital platform, I think, especially when we start to train those folks up on what's needed in terms of making our websites accessible. That is the forum where we will do some training that's necessary, in order for the county to comply with state law and that kind of thing too. So.
Kelly, I'd love to chime in a little bit on your question, because I think it's really important about, what are the expectations, who is kind of, who is mandating this, who's saying this needs to happen. And in some of the research that Dave and I did, we had a conversation with the Director of Communications from Fort Collins, and we talked about, what was some of the hardest things in the change management process of actually having kind of going from the way that Pickens County works now to having a real kind of formalized strategic plan. And she said one of the most important pieces was that leadership repeatedly and consistently was behind the communications team. That they say, do you, in this context, is someone from your department going to the communicators group? Are you following the protocol? Are you meeting with them on an annual basis? How is the implementation of your annual plan going? Blah, blah, blah. So I think it's a really important piece, because Marcy and her team, as authoritative as they are, need the backing of leadership for sure. I'm guessing John, you
Yeah.
thoughts about
Yeah,
that?
and I just had my microphone is a little wobbly here. And I just add in, Kelly, I think relative to the board's opportunity as we roll this out, that's going to be kind of a launching, another launching point for these conversations in the organization. And I think some commentary from the board or direction from the board as far as what success looks like to you and what your expectations are around communications is always helpful for the organization to understand, and also, you know, kind of emphasize your support really for these types of efforts. As you said, sometimes we're doing this and plowing forward and not necessarily taking that time. That's a really good perspective. And there's an expectation probably that follows on that from the board that I think would be good to communicate to this group.
Francie.
So when you guys are talking about communications, I don't know if this is for you, John, or Marcy, or you're not just talking about outward-facing communications. You're talking about communication within a department, among employees, from administration to staff. You're talking about all of that.
All levels of internal, within the department, department to department, department to leadership, and vice versa. Yeah. It's a good clarification.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would almost see it in 3 areas, Francie. There's the external, out to the public, the two-way dialogue with the public, engagement. There's the internal, among employees within the organization, and then the crisis, which is almost its own kind of bucket of communications.
So I have a couple of thoughts where things that I have a feeling that things aren't right, and I don't totally understand why, but one would have to do with the county website, which in spite of the fact that it was kind of reworked, I still have trouble navigating around to find something. I have members of the public come to me to try to find out information because they get lost when they're trying to find information on the county website. So I think that's like a first point of contact for a lot of people. They'll go to county website, and if they can't find the information easily, that's like a breakdown in our communication system to me. So I think that's something we still need to work on. The other thing has to do with the airport discussions. We get communications back from the public that there are certain members of the public who don't believe a word that our communications about the airport are saying.
Really?
And they're saying it's just propaganda. They don't pay attention to it. It's almost like whatever we are saying in our communications to the public, they take it as a falsehood. So we have a communications problem right there. And I almost get to the point where whatever that group is feeding back to us, to me, is just propaganda, and I don't even pay attention to it anymore. So it's like this divide between for the airport improvements and those opposed to it in terms of communication and lack of communication. So I think that's a problem that we need to work on, and I think this is partly an attempt to address some of that, the external communications and dialogue between the public and the county.
Absolutely. And those more controversial topics are always going to be part of local government, right? I mean, John has said that's like the natural tension that exists in an organization like this. So that will always be on the communications team's plate, those particularly tension-filled issues. And I would say that, you know, the plan includes the IAP2, what does that stand for again? Spectrum of Public Participation.
International Association for Public Participation.
Yeah, and so
You've seen it before.
yeah, okay. Yeah. Anyway, that talks a lot about, you know, public participation and things like that. And of course, within controversial topics, thinking of that framework is important too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I did have one question about something in the packet, and it mentioned IAP2 or one AP2. I'm not
That's
sure.
it.
That's the one.
That's what they were just talking about, the international.
Okay, international. Okay. I just was
The
an
PP is
acronym that I
P2.
didn't know. Okay.
From like, are you staying informed or are you staying involved? And like that.
And I, you know, just full disclosure, I have a lot more, a deeper background in sort of the communication side of things and less on the engagement. So our team is actually next week, I think in 2 weeks, we're taking an IAP2 training, our second training in that framework. And I think we're also going to learn from you, John, in the future of just learning more about engagement.
Trainings.
So, yeah.
Not my favorite thing.
Okay, does anyone else have any more questions? Greg, are you good?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to say, I'm still, the one thing that resonated was one of the comments, I think it was by Human Services, and they were saying, well, you know, in order not to confuse people, they're being conservative with their, with the amount of communication they do to avoid swamping people, something to that effect. And it kind of just makes me realize that in the meantime, until this plan is up and rolling, simplicity and straight talk are really the most important thing. And I know how hard that can be with all the various issues, especially when they become controversial and people are trying to sow misinformation, for instance. But that's really, it comes down to those two things for me. You know, if this becomes so complicated that people don't think we're talking straight, then we won't have succeeded. And the only way I can think of, you know, keeping it as simple as possible. So good luck with all that. And I look forward to seeing where this goes. My other question was, you know, how often have we actually engaged outside contractors since COVID? And then the other one was, I was still trying to, it sounded as if we might be designing messages for specific groups, and that could get kind of messy. And I just wanted, if you want to comment on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, Greg, the amount of usage for third-party contractors has been greatly reduced since the height of COVID. I mean, this team, I think during our budget presentation in November, we described to you the savings that our department had and how much more this team was taking on in terms of what we used to sort of farm out to vendors. That said, in the future, contractors will continue to be a resource for us. And they are right now. You know, different departments use vendors in the community. So I think that, you know, we need to include those vendors in sort of almost enlisting them like we do our internal countywide communicators to carry forward sort of the this new way of doing things in the future. But we will continue to rely on them. Our reliance on contractors has been greatly reduced, though. So I would imagine it's not, it will not go up to what it was during COVID. I mean, we had a communications team of, I don't know, 9 or 10 people, I think, who are mostly contractors during that period.
Got it. Thanks. I had one other thought also, just
Karen,
that.
Greg, Karen wants to add something.
I'm just going to add one thing. Sorry.
Marcy's not giving credit to. I think on the contractor piece, I wanted to bring attention to you all, is what we used to farm out was very, I don't want to say basic, but a lot of the simple stuff. The plan that's in front of you, Abby did the graphic designs. That's stuff that we used to farm out that we've brought in-house. So now when we're using contractors, it's at a different level. So we're using those dollars more intentionally on the communication needs versus we were doing it for a lot of just the stuff that now Marcy and her team have brought in-house. So she wasn't talking, and I wanted to really bring in, that's where, that's the change in the contractors that we're looking at going to that hasn't been available before.
That's why we agreed to bring in 2 new FTEs.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I was very wise in that decision.
Do I have time to address Greg's other question about messaging to different audiences, or do we need to move on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay,
and I
please.
forgot the one was on the tip of my tongue. I just lost, but I'll get it back.
Well, thanks, Greg. You've asked it twice, and I'll give you an example. We talked about how the assessment has been, it's a controversial thing, and there's people who are really impacted by the assessment and care. And so it's not so much about this idea of different messages for different audiences on the same topic, but there's a group of people who really care about the assessment. The property owners are a core stakeholder group in that who really care about the change in assessed value and thus taxation. So they need to know what's going on. They need to be involved in, if there's an engagement towards a decision, that group of people needs a specific and intentional either communication and or engagement. Other people who don't own property may not have an interest in the assessment or the taxation. So it's really less about different kinds of messages to different kinds of people and more about who are we trying to connect with and who are the stakeholders, and let's talk to those people as opposed to everybody as a blanket of visitors and constituents and things like that. So really identifying who's important to talk to or engage with.
Got it. Thank you. And I remembered my final question was, Marcy, are you going to run press releases if it's an important topic? Are you going to run press releases by the board, or so as we've all mentioned, it's really uncomfortable to read about something the county's doing in the paper before the board knows about it. And so I'm just wondering how is this going to work so at least we have a chance of being informed slightly ahead of the rest of the community if something's happening?
Yeah, it's a good question, Greg. I mean, obviously that some press releases are shared with you prior to their distribution. I would point out that you, along with most community members, rely on the newspaper to find out what's happening at the county. That's what we heard in our community survey, and that's one thing we would like to change a little bit, is sort of more owning the narrative, the story we're trying to tell, rather than relying so heavily on the newspapers to tell our story. They are obviously a critical partner, and we want to continue to have good relationships there, but so you're not alone in that. And in terms of whether, I don't know. I guess that's a question for the board about if we want to share everything.
It would be easy enough, I think, to add the board or the BoCC to all kind of press releases that are issued. I'd caution Greg against trying to run or edit press releases, because we probably won't get them out in a timely manner. But I think what I'm hearing is that from time to time we may be doing a press release or such that, or you're reading about something in the paper that we did a press release on that you all are not necessarily aware of. It's easy enough, if that's a desire of the board, to have you on that
and
distribution
I think it's gotten
list.
better lately. We've been getting press releases ahead of time. This is coming out and it's going to be released this afternoon, just so we have that heads up. Not so we can edit a press release.
Yeah.
But so we can just know it's going out there.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks,
That's
John.
really
and
important
thanks,
for us.
Marcy and team at Abby and Rosa. This is great, and your consultants. Finally, I just wanted to say, I think I heard you say how important the media is and how important it is the newspaper is disseminating information from their objective, hopefully point of view, because we definitely need their participation. If it's just messaging coming from us, I don't know how long people will believe it. So it's important to have an independent journalist looking over our shoulders, however uncomfortable that can be at times.
All right. Thanks for your comments, Greg.
Thanks.
I think we need to end this discussion. We've eaten into a big part of our break time. So thank you all for being here.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
We look forward to the upcoming products, Marcy.
So
and
can we
your
just
team.
take 10 maybe?
So,
Thank you.
How much time do people need?
No, no, Sam's here for our interview.
Sam is here already, and we don't want to keep, I mean, I need a break right now.
Yeah,
for
we don't
at
want to
least
delay
5.
Sam.
Yeah,
So 10, is 10 okay?
10 minutes, okay. So about, well, let's go till 5 after 3, we'll take it up, so 8 minutes.
Beware that happens.
Okay, welcome back everybody from our break. We're continuing on our meeting on work session on February 13th. So next up we have a citizen board interview with Sam Cox. And Sam, you have an amazing resume.
You looked at it.
Yeah,
Looked at it,
great.
definitely. So
Like,
you
he
are
did what?
applying to be on the election commission. So could you tell us why you want to be on the election commission, and tell us a little bit about your background and how that would
Right. Well, I was mainly a ski patroller and a river guide, and my bachelor's degree was in political science. I was a full-time staffer for the McGovern campaign 50 years ago, and then came to Aspen and mainly just forgot about politics. But I guess the polarization that we see in this country kind of got me reading books again. And Stacey Abrams and a book by David Pepper called Saving Democracy. And he was the one that said, you know, even in red states, you got to do stuff. And even in blue states, you got to do stuff. And so I was thinking maybe I should be a poll watcher or work in a campaign. And then I saw the opening on the election commission and thought, well, maybe that'd be a good place to start. And if I were to happen to move to a red state, it would be good experience for me, I think, to forward my point of view or forward fairness in elections, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. So people view Colorado sort of as a blue or a purple state.
Right.
But working with county commissioners from all the counties in the state that are red. Most of the land in Colorado is a red territory.
Indeed.
The population centers are the blue territory.
That's right.
So some of us are used to working across the aisle all the time with the people on both sides of the political spectrum.
Yep.
So I understand where you're coming from.
I voted Republican in the last primary so I could vote against Boebert, but it didn't seem to help much.
I don't think you were the lone
So
person.
questions from the board? Francie?
I just thank you for that answer. It was wonderful. I loved it. And
Okay.
and that's why I'm sitting here, because during the Trump years, it was all about, if you want to make something happen, run for office. I said,
Right.
okay.
Well, I live on West Cypress Creek Roads, so
you do?
thanks for your work in District 5. Ms. McNicholas Curry, nice to meet you.
Hi, you too as well. I have some questions.
Yeah,
That's
go
okay.
ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you for applying. I appreciate it. So have you been you're an unaffiliated. Did you change your affiliation, or has that been a long standing?
You know, I left it at unaffiliated. I've always voted Democratic, but so I'll probably change it back to Democratic at some point. Although it's nice getting both ballots.
And then have you or anyone close to you had experience as an election worker for any elections, either in this state or a different state?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't.
And have you or anyone else that you may be close to have had it been subject to any complaint related to election integrity? Have you had any complaint about what you've observed, or has anyone in your family in this state or another
No, I
state?
think just what I read and what's in the news. No, nothing personally.
Okay, and then our bylaws are very nondescript about how your board would adjudicate a complaint against the elections process. And so I just wonder, how would you approach that? Like, it's a very generic question, because there's a whole range of things that could come to you.
Right.
Frankly, it doesn't happen at all, really. So you may find yourself a little bored, but
Right.
this is a very important year, and so having a well-functioning commission is important. But I guess I'm just wondering, like, how would you approach a complaint that the commission would receive against a process or an action related
Right.
to Pickens County's elections?
Right. Well, I guess with as open a mind as possible. Part of your earlier question, it occurred to me, well, I do have a brother-in-law and a father-in-law who are dyed-in-the-wool Republicans, and they are always telling me how mail-in voting shouldn't be allowed. And I'm like, well, I live in Colorado where we've been mail-in voting for 10 years. It doesn't seem to be a problem. And, you know, I tell them I take my ballot to the drop-in or to the drop box because I don't want to put 2 stamps on it. And I know there's a camera there that's making sure I'm not harvesting ballots and that kind of thing. But, you know, all that's coming obviously from kind of the Democratic point of view. And I guess I would just try to be open-minded about whatever came for the board.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Steve?
Greg? Let's have Greg first and then Patty.
Hi, Greg.
Hey, Sam. Yeah, Sam, this will be interesting because I think the most time I've ever spent with you is in a kayak on a river somewhere.
Right.
And it's great to see you again after all these years.
Likewise.
I just wanted to say, yeah.
The kayaking
Thanks
isn't
for
quite as
stepping
easy as
up.
it used to be, right?
Right, yeah, somehow it got a lot more difficult to roll up.
Right.
I wanted to share, I'm just really grateful that you're re-engaging because obviously you, before you came to Aspen, you seemed to be really on a track with staying in tune and being part of the whole process. And it's really gratifying to see you returning to that here after a 50-year engagement as a ski bum and kayaker. And I'm glad to see you returning to the fold. Although I do know you have been working hard and had a full career here. So anyway, just really grateful to see you here. I don't have another question other than that I think I heard you say that, objectivity obviously is the issue. I'd say the odds are you might run into more problems because we've had such a majority of Democrats in the community. You may have find yourself dealing occasionally with issues with Democratic voters, perhaps more than Republicans. We're not like other communities in the state or in other states where we have such difficulties. But I guess we just need to be on guard with it. But it sounds to me like you would be a great candidate and that you're probably ready for anything.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay, Patty?
Yeah, I'm just going to say that I've known Sam for 40 years.
I would say 40, yeah.
Yeah, and if anybody's going to do his homework and be educated on an issue, it's Sam. As you can tell, he's been back to reading again. And open-minded, definitely. I mean, he has dealt with some difficult situations over the years, and he's pulled through for everybody on all sides, and I think he would be a great and a fair representative on the election board.
Thanks.
Do you live near John Ely?
Yes, we're just a half mile from John, and across from your old guy, George Newman. I guess you replaced George, but we can see his house from our house.
He's not so old.
No. Right.
That's a great neighborhood.
Yeah, John doesn't know that I just got a Chevy Bolt. We've got the
did?
big cars too, and he's like, "When are you going to get another small car?"
I just did the same thing. I've had a truck forever, and I got a Subaru electric.
Okay, nice.
So, Sam, there are 2 vacancies right now on the election commission because one member moved out of the county, still lives in the valley, but so I think you probably have a pretty fair chance of us.
Thanks. I noticed my
We are the
chances
ones who
increased by
decide
2.
who to appoint.
Yeah.
And I also became an unaffiliated registration a couple of years ago. And I actually would urge you to stay unaffiliated.
Okay.
I am enjoying being unaffiliated. I am actually paying more attention to what people on both sides are saying on issues. And I voted in the Republican primary, and it was the first time in years that I had really paid attention to what the different people running for different offices were saying. Okay. So I felt like I was a better voter by being unaffiliated.
Interesting. Cool.
So something to consider.
Okay, thanks.
So we will definitely consider your application for this board, and it might take a few weeks for us to make our decision, but
Okay.
And we have to
before
do it
we
formally.
before we let
Implement
you
our
know.
decision, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I
Cool.
add something?
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
want to add, just so you talk with staff as to what the role is specifically and during the election, and I think you'll find it very interesting. Kelly and I have both worked Kelly used to be the elections manager here at Pickens County.
Okay, right.
But I worked as an election judge for, God, I don't know how many years. And I keep asking people, inspiring people to do the same. But if you can at least observe what goes on during an election, it's fascinating and it's fun and it shows democracy at its best, and it also shows what an amazing job Pickens County does.
I can see Ingrid's house from my house also. And I'll try
So you're
not to be
leaving
too
at
much.
6 a.m, coming back at 9 o'clock at night.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
election
one
day.
other thing, Sam, do you have any questions for us or for our
No, I don't think
clerk's
so.
office staff at
I
this
wanted to
point?
say that my friend Michael Kinsley wrote a letter to the editor a few days ago, and I have to agree with him that you guys work very hard and you're very dedicated, and to heck with what the polls say.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, thanks, and it's good to see you,
Thank
Sam.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Let's see.
Thank you. We're done with you.
Let's see, we have future agendas now, John.
I would just update based on our last conversation. So Ingrid and I had a talk about the bylaws, and she and I agreed that it's probably not most appropriate for her to be involved in the redrafting of those, given that it is sort of monitoring her office's actions. I did say, well, I'll probably run a few things by you, but I'm going to get with John Ely and work more closely with him.
And then just keep us
bringing
in the
something
loop.
back to the board.
Perfect.
Okay,
Kelly.
thanks
Thanks,
for
Kelly.
that update,
Yeah.
Kelly.
All right. Just a couple items for future agendas. First, we are working on a joint meeting with the board and the Airport Advisory Board in March. I know we're going to have some travel dates in there, I think, for RAFTA.
The 19th through the weekend. To the Friday.
And then towards the end of March. So we'll look for a week that all of you are here, and that's to really update on the conversations around the ALP and provide some opportunity for conversation there. So more to come on that. It is looking right now like we do have time on our March 12th meeting, so we're going to check on the Airport Advisory Board's availability to maybe join us here. And then just a note that we will have 2 commissioners out on the 19th. Then actually the travel at the end of the month doesn't conflict with any meetings. So that's all I have for future agendas.
Travel at the
right
end of the
now.
month, though, we have a meeting on the 28th of February, right?
Oh, we will have a conflict.
Mm-hmm. And I think Francie and I will
Is that
be
the
gone.
28th? Is departure on the 28th? I've been
Yeah,
waiting to
because
hear
we're
I have it on.
we're still working on logistics, but we want to have a full day the 29th.
Yeah,
So
so
we'll
we need
keep
to
that
let
in
staff
mind.
know if they're moving things to the 28th. They'll only have 3 members of the board here.
That's all I have on future agendas.
Okay, does anybody have anything for future agendas? Okay, open discussion.
I just want to hand out a email that we received from the FAA just to make sure the board is in the loop here. And Greg, this is the, okay, I'll try and get back to a mic here so Greg can actually hear me.
Yeah, I've got it here, John.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Yeah, so we had shared the report regarding the condition of the runway.
Can we have it just a second to read it before you go on?
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's hard to listen and
You
read
bet.
at the same time. Thank you.
Interesting.
It's just what we were talking about. Clear.
Yes, I wanted to be sure this was shared with the board. This is not a surprise. The FAA has been communicating this. This will also go to the Airport Advisory Board on Thursday, and it's really the FAA just reminding us that we have an existing airport layout plan. We have flagged changes for them, and they are really starting to pull in their discretionary funding until it is going towards an approved airport layout plan. And so they wanted to be clear with staff. We thought that is important to roll up to the AAB and this board for your awareness. There's really no
time horizon for the current ALP process. When would the soonest and
Yeah, so that's going to be part of our joint meeting, but this is going to take some time now. We've got some modeling that we have to do
For the crossings.
for the crossings and that sort of thing. That's part of what we're going to talk about with the Airport Advisory Board. We believe that, frankly, will probably add a few months to our submission timeline. So it could be, we could be out to this fall for submission.
Which would subtract extended life for the runway.
Correct. So we are going to be having to cover that. We expect that the annual closures and repairs that we have been doing, that we have been getting some grant funding for, we'll have to start covering out of airport revenues. We'll probably still ask for discretionary funding, but I think they're giving a pretty strong indication that we will not receive that
For repairing
funding.
the runway
Yeah.
if we have a new ALP that requires it to be where
Yep.
it is.
Right, but they asked us to do the modeling, correct?
Not well. It will be required.
But
The
they
model.
asked, they said as part of these crossings, they wanted
Right.
to see modeling, so.
Staff
part of it,
is-
there's kind of not an equal shared responsibility, but a partial.
Yeah, there's going to be some of that discussion when we get together. Staff is recommending we do the modeling before submitting. We don't have to do it that way. We could submit first, but we'd
Maybe
like to
just
know
take
what
an
the
ink
modeling
pen and
shows.
Draw little bridges or little
Yeah.
things across the runway and say, here's our modeling, and
And Steve, I think Greg.
Yeah,
had
Greg,
that.
I saw his hand. Greg?
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to be clear with this letter, John. They're saying the project must be shown on the approved ALP. So what we're talking about is submitting the ALP that we intend to submit. And when that is approved, then they're going to, hopefully the discretionary funding will kick back in. In the meantime, the only ALP that they would approve any funding for would be the runway to the west.
That's correct. Yeah,
That includes this May's work?
correct.
Thank you. I think this is a really clear letter, and I'm glad you shared it with us today, and I'm hoping the public has a chance to understand the significance of this. And I'm also grateful to see that they articulated the actual amount of the federal grant funding since 1982, grant assurances of $116.5 million. to show just how deeply we are married to the FAA on this. I think that helps. Thanks.
Yeah. I'll also share, I did not print this off for you, but we did get an email that our fleet forecast that the board submitted was also approved. And so that with the A220-300 as our design aircraft. So that is a milestone that allows us to move forward with the ALP
Just in
now.
case it ever flies in here, which is not a given.
It's interesting that with the problems at Boeing, they are expecting more production from Airbus than they were previous to these panels flying off. So it's probably more likely than not that Airbus will be, one size or another, will be coming here. I mean, more likely than it was before, I should say.
Difficult to say
We don't know.
For sure.
what those business decisions are going to be.
Are there members of the AAB that are traveling to DC at the end of the month?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of anyway.
We could have somebody go. I mean, yeah.
Just adds to the.
Okay, and then, sorry.
Do you have another, John?
Are we on open discussion? Or
We are.
Yes.
I do have a
Okay, thank
future
you.
agenda thing that I forgot to
Oh.
note, though. Since
Should
we
we go
moved
back?
our meeting to the 6th because of primary,
Mhm.
presidential primary election on the 5th, we have an APSHA meeting at 4 here.
Ah.
So finishing our work session prior to that would be helpful, or communicating to APSHA.
Oh, so we should move that to the 6th. Thank you for that.
So and they meet
Hey,
here?
Could I
They meet here.
go back to the question Kelly asked just now, just regarding AAB members joining the contingent to DC? I certainly would invite that. Just wanted to hear your thoughts.
I think the discussion is a little different than, we need to discuss what we're discussing before
Yeah,
we
we do.
decide who to invite. Because having been to a lot of meetings where you're running from point A to point B, too many people add to the confusion and to the conversation, and you don't get as much accomplished sometimes as I think you would. But let's see what we're gonna actually, the points we're bringing up, and see if it's appropriate.
Yeah, and I think our intent right now is to focus on the letter that this board approved around
The environment.
lobbying for the environmental initiatives and being sure there's awareness around some of the potential upcoming issues with an ALP that we could use federal help overcoming.
Well, when we go with
Hey,
Raptor, we
could I-
take quite a few people. Like, I think, I'm sorry, Greg, we had, I think, 7 people there last time, and each person spoke. It was very, and it was extemporaneous, which was interesting, and each person spoke about something different. It worked out pretty well. But I agree with you in general. Fewer is usually more productive.
Greg?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make a note that Rich and I received a letter from Hillary Henry in Senator Bennett's office introducing us to Suzanne Brooks, who's the senior policy advisor on energy, climate, and environment in that office. And we've arranged a call for Thursday, February 29th. Or at least we think that's a possible day, and either in the morning or the afternoon, just to talk about the letter and how Senator Bennett might help us.
That's why we're gonna be in
And I
DC.
wanted,
He won't be.
I'm sorry?
The call's with him. He won't be there.
Oh, okay. But he's talking to the person we're gonna be talking with in DC about the letter we're talking about?
No, I don't think so. She's wondering, who are you going to be speaking with? Is that person based in Washington or Denver?
At this point, Suzanne Brooks is that advisor, and I don't know who you're talking to in Washington. Unfortunately, I'm not in that loop. But this is about trying to tee it up. And so since we've been contacted by them and they're willing to talk to us in advance,
What are we doing?
I think, and since Rich is out of town, I thought I better bring this up now. I thought he would have brought this forward, but I realize he's not here. I wanted to make sure that we're all coordinated on this conversation. And, you know, once again, I don't know how many people can participate, but we should figure out who should be on that call, just so that the conversation on that call and then in Washington are both coordinated and hopefully made more potent by, you know, engaging them to help us. It seems to me that if we can get the Senator's team on our side and fully understanding where we're headed with this, it's going to be a lot easier to get them to help us. And that was the intent of suggesting this call, which was initiated by Hillary Henry in Senator Bennett's office.
Is this person in Bennett's office or in, yeah? So
Bennett's,
if you
yes,
could do, maybe
Bennett's
you could
office.
do the call before then, so that,
Because that's the same day we're gonna be there. Meeting in his office is the 29th of February.
that's right.
Right.
Oh, it is.
To
Wow.
talk about this issue at hand.
So if
Right, okay.
Can you vet
So
that out,
let me-
John?
yeah,
They
gr-
suggested 2 other dates, which are during our work session and our regular meeting. So we could take a break from the work session on the 27th and possibly, if that would help.
yeah. So but before, you know, it was on the same date. Multiple touch points are not going to be bad with the congressional offices, so long as
the
our
same
message
is
is
being
consistent.
transferred, because
Exactly.
I don't want to get back there and have to spend my time working out confusion over.
Correct. Yeah. So as long as we're consistent, we can work that out, and I think we will work on the dates. Now, if they're looking at the 29th, Greg, and this is DC, we may just want to carry that in person.
John, I'm going to forward this letter to you.
Okay, that'd
and-
be helpful. Thank you.
And then we can try to figure out this thing. I did respond to them saying, well, the 29th was the only day that I could participate because we'd be in BoC activities, but I didn't realize that was the date you're going to Washington.
Yeah.
So I'll forward this to you and we can figure out how to proceed from there.
It seems to me that the in-person meeting with this person in Senator Bennett's office in Washington would be much more productive.
Yeah. So
I'm hoping
Then having
in-person
two
meetings with Bennett.
Yeah, that's,
We're hopefully
Was
meeting
last
with
time I was in
Senator
Washington.
Bennett and hopefully meeting with Senator Hickenlooper when we're in DC.
and agencies, and so that's what our lobby group is going to be working on for us.
So John, do you have any other open discussion items?
The other item, I know we just did the interview, but we do have an opportunity. We're going to have an appointment resolution coming up on the 28th. And it would be, Ingrid is going to be having, and I don't have the date here, she's going to be having her annual meeting with the Election Commission. So if we had an idea of appointment, if Sam was going to be an applicant that you all would look at
I
for
have every
appointing,
intention of supporting Sam for this.
then we
Me
can get
too.
him invited to that meeting. And so if you want to give staff direction to prepare a resolution with Sam's appointment, we're hoping to do that. And then, go
Well,
ahead.
we could talk about that right now. I have a feeling what the sentiment here on the board is, but we should probably do a thumbs up sort of a thing on appointing Sam Cox to the Election Commission.
thumbs up for me.
Me too.
Thumbs up for me.
Okay. So I think all of us would like to have
I'll
Sam
just
on there.
articulate my concern about his Democratic leanings on a board that's already a majority Democratic.
But he
That's-
can be very.
That's one reason
Sam's
why
very
I
well-read
urged
and
him
very
to
literate,
stay
very smart.
unaffiliated and
Right.
to look at it differently, to listen to both
Just
sides equally.
And he can still
Register
roll
my
up, Greg.
concern on the record.
And then I believe an email came to you. If not, we can get it forwarded. But we did receive a request from Western Slope Rural Philanthropy Days asking for a sponsorship. It is one that we did
Years
several
ago. Is it
years
the thing
ago.
in Rifle?
Now, yeah, it was in Rifleton. It's going to be in Fruta now this year. It's back on the western slope, June 5th through 7th. They are asking for a $2,500 sponsorship, which is close, I think, to what we did last time. Did you all receive that request? or-
I did not.
I didn't receive that request,
We
but
can get that forwarded to
I don't
you.
think, did any of us go last time?
I don't remember.
My sister was an organizer of the one in Paonia, went the year it was in Paonia. She's involved with the Rural Philanthropy Days thing, but I don't know if she still is.
I need to know more about it before I agree to do $2,500.
If you could forward the email to all of us, John, so we're all on the same page on that.
Yep, we'll get that forwarded to you.
Okay.
And that's all I have for open discussion.
Okay, other board members?
I'm good.
I have one item I want to bring up, which I didn't have, I wrote it down during the meeting today. The T-coil does not work in this room. I have a really hard time.
I thought he said teak oil. I said,
don't
we
know
don't
what he
use
said.
teak oil on our,
T-coil is a wire
the
buried.
T-coil.
T-coil.
That comes from the thermostat.
And Andrew and I talked about it. I checked it a bunch of times and it would work and then it wouldn't work, but it hasn't been working now. Now for me, the best way for me to hear in our meetings here would be to take my hearing aids off and go on the Zoom call and put on my headphones, and then I'd be able to hear everything perfectly clearly when anybody's speaking in any of the mics. But if someone has a soft voice, like, you know, there are staff people who have soft voices, and you probably had trouble hearing today.
I could hear today, but I had to work at it.
It was
Have
harder
to really
today.
concentrate to hear. When that might explain why I can be exhausted at the end of a meeting, because you're struggling to hear every word. If I have my headphones on, I'd be able to hear really easily, and maybe I'll have to do that unless we can. With the T-coil, my hearing aids are designed for the T-coil, and
I just shot Andrew an email, so I'll follow up on that.
yeah. And I know he's worked on it. There's a contractor who works on this system, and I think they were here working on something, but
They were here working on the whole audio and it got worse.
Yeah.
I know.
Number of years?
okay. Does anybody else have anything for the good of the order today?
Greg, have anything?
Greg?
No, thank you. I'm good.
Okay, let's all go home. Greg will beat us all there, and get well. Get well, Greg.
I intend to see you tomorrow. I'm not symptomatic, and I will do another test, but I'm planning on being in there tomorrow. Thank you.
Great.
Okay,
Great.
so this work session is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
There was